What's up, everybody? Michael F. Florio here with my man Marcas Grant from NFL Fantasy, and today we're going to be talking about the chosen one. We've heard so much about this player over the last 3 years. It really looks like a lock, like he is going to be the number one pick in the 2021 draft. And of course, we are talking about Clemson's quarterback Trevor Lawrence, who myself and many others are excited to see at the pro level. So, Marcus, if he is the first overall pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, like we all expect, what do you feel about his fantasy value, and is he worth drafting in 2021?
He's absolutely worth drafting. Now, obviously, as with all players, it sort of depends on what the asking draft price is. But I would expect that in a lot of leagues, you're going to see Trevor Lawrence probably coming off the board in the 9th or 10th round. Maybe a little bit earlier in some spots, maybe a little bit later in others. But I would think that'll be probably the average for him. And I feel like that's about right. He's a guy with plenty of upside. I mean, he checks all the boxes in terms of a prospect. He's got the size, he's got the arm strength, the accuracy. He can get out of the pocket and run a little bit. I mean, people are calling him the most complete, sure thing prospect at quarterback since Andrew Luck a few years ago coming out of Stanford. And so I think for that reason, I mean, it's sort of like what we saw with Joe Burrow, right? Where he came out and everybody believed he was can't miss and was playing well until he was unfortunately hurt. And I think the same thing applies to Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville. He's going to get the opportunity to be the chosen one from the beginning, and that alone makes him worth a swing in a lot of fantasy drafts.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Marcus. And you saw the highlight there. That's the sneakiest thing about him, is he can add points with his legs. And the reason we're hyping him is because, I mean, he is huge. He has a cannon for an arm. He can make all the throws that he's going to be asked to make at the NFL level. But he can also give you some fantasy points there with his legs. So I completely agree. I think he very much so deserves to be drafted. I would take him somewhere in the mix with like those low-end QB1s, high-end QB2s, guys like Matt Stafford, Tom Brady, Joe Burrow in that tier. But I think 9th or 10th round sounds about right for him. But now, what about his upside, Marcus? Can he do something like the long-haired stud quarterback that we had in 2020 in Justin Herbert? Can Trevor Lawrence have a season like that?
He absolutely can. Now, hopefully he doesn't surprise us all mid-season and cut his hair off like Justin Herbert did last year. But in terms of what he can do, I do think he can have that level of success because, as you mentioned, he is a complete prospect. Now, I think the difference is he's probably going to a team that maybe isn't quite as deep with pass catchers as the Chargers were, but there are some guys that are around him that can help him make plays. But I just think that the ability is there so much, and I think that the Jaguars are going to give him the keys to the car right away. So he's going to go out, he's going to become a playmaker, and I think he's a guy who does have that upside that he can compare very favorably to what Justin Herbert did. I mean, let's remember, nobody expected Justin Herbert to do what he did last year, and the expectations, I think, are there that Trevor Lawrence can match or maybe even better that.
Yeah, I agree. I think the expectations are higher. And you see what Justin Herbert did last year, over 4,300 yards and 31 touchdowns. That is more than the Jaguars as a team have put up in each of the last 3 seasons. But I do think with the physical talent in a Trevor Lawrence, they haven't had a talent like that. The upgraded play calling abilities in Urban Meyer, I think that will lead to Trevor Lawrence being this year's Justin Herbert. He just might not come out of nowhere like Herbert did. And Herbert low-key rushed for 5 touchdowns as a rookie last year. And Trevor Lawrence, like I said earlier, he can give you points with his legs. He is so good at selling the handoff near the line, near the goal line and running it in. He's had 8 or more rushing touchdowns in his last 2 years. So I do think he can be this year's Justin Herbert. But with a new quarterback, we know that means a lot for the pieces around him as well. And the number one weapon there, in the passing game at least, is DJ Chark Jr. So do you think that he could bounce back in 2021 if Trevor Lawrence is his quarterback?
I do think he can. Look, last year was sort of a weird lost year for the Jaguars offensively. They went through a number of quarterbacks. I mean, Gardner Minshew started the year, lost his job, had some injuries. I think just having a consistent player at the position, first off, will help. But on top of that, getting an upgrade, because Trevor Lawrence presumably is going to be a major upgrade from everybody who's played the position for the Jags for the last couple of seasons. Right now, I know early on, for the folks who were getting in early on this, the asking price in the draft is, mid to late 6th round on DJ Chark. I'm very comfortable with it there. Even if it goes up, say, a round or so, I think I'm still okay. Hopefully, it doesn't go much past that. I don't think it will, but I do think there's a chance for DJ Chark to really bounce back. And, to get him, say, at a low-end wide receiver 2 or high-end wide receiver 3 sort of draft price, and maybe look for the wide receiver 2 upside, I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah, Marcus, it's like we host shows together or something, because that was exactly my thinking. He's going in the 6th round right now. I expect him come, August to probably be a 5th round, and I'm okay paying that price. If it got a lot higher, 4th, 3rd round even, then I would be out. But let's remember, he put up over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns with Gardner Minshew in 2019. So I'm expecting the best quarterback he's played with as a pro, he can top those numbers, and I think the down 2020 may keep him in that 5th round range a little bit. So I'm hopeful for that. What about for the receiver that is going to be lining up opposite of him, someone that we know is going to come with plenty of hype, Laviska Shenault? Where do you anticipate him going, and is he a player that you're going to be targeting if Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback in 2021?
I was driving the Laviska Shenault hype train all last offseason when the draft price was a lot lower. And I still think it's going to be, if not in the double-digit rounds, probably pretty close to it. But I still love his upside. I love the fact that he can be kind of a Swiss Army knife there. And I think he really proved that he is at least ready to be the number 2 receiver on this team behind DJ Chark. And so just again, I expect Chark to have some added value with Trevor Lawrence. I think the same applies to Shenault. I would be very curious to see what Urban Meyer and his coaching staff can do with him. Urban being a very creative guy who has seen these guys at the college level, can be very creative with what they do. I'd like to think that you'll start to see the Jaguars use Shenault sort of the way Colorado did when he was in college there. But I still love the upside. And if I'm sitting around there in the 9th round, 10th round later, and he's on the board, I would definitely take that shot, because I think, I'm not going to say the Jaguars offense is going to go to the moon, but I do think it's going to be a lot better, a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting than what we've seen in the last couple of years. And I think Shenault's going to be a part of that.
So the Jaguars are not the AMC of NFL teams. They're not going to go to the moon. But Marcus, again, this is one that we're on the same line of thinking. I had 9th round for Shenault, but I could see him going a little bit earlier than that come August, just because we know he's going to have a lot of hype, because all the reasons you said. I think Urban Meyer is going to get really creative with him, move him all around the field, use him in the backfield at times. And again, we know the hype machine that has been behind him in last year as a rookie. I expect that to continue to grow. But for me, I would be willing to pay that price depending on my roster construction. If he was my 4th wide receiver, someone I could put on my bench, I'm okay with it. I like that a lot more than someone that I gotta start on a weekly basis. But one more player we gotta talk about. The lone bright spot for the Jaguars in 2020 was James Robinson. He was a top 5 running back until he got hurt late in the season. What do you think a quarterback upgrade into Trevor Lawrence would mean for James Robinson and his fantasy value?
So as high as we are on everybody, this is the one guy that I think takes a hit in this offense, in part because Trevor Lawrence is going to be there, and I think they are going to allow him to sort of run the offense a little bit more. They're going to put the ball in his hands a lot more, so I think that means there are going to be fewer opportunities for Robinson to rush the football like we saw last year. The other part of it has actually, I think, more to do with the Jaguars in general than it does Trevor Lawrence, in that last year, part of the reason Robinson got that opportunity is because there really was no one else back there to challenge him. You had players, opting out because of COVID. You had other guys who were injured and just not available. And so because of that, the Jaguars were pretty much a one running back team all year long. It was the James Robinson show. I just don't believe that that's going to happen again in 2021. So I don't know who else is going to be back there. I don't know if we see, say, a Divine Ozigbo or somebody else come back there and get some of these touches, if maybe they draft someone or add in free agency. But I just can't imagine that we're going to see James Robinson get the same workhorse load last year, and then throw in the fact that I do expect him to be a little more pass heavy with Trevor Lawrence. I would be a little bit more hands off about Robinson.
Yeah, I can't rank him as a top 5 running back like he was last year. I do think he belongs as a low-end RB1, as long as what you said, Marcus, if they do not draft a big-name running back or sign a big-name running back to give him a lot of competition there. What I'm worried about especially is he was great near the goal line last year, and as I said earlier, Trevor Lawrence is amazing at selling the handoff near the goal line and then just rolling out and running it in himself. He did it repeatedly over and over again at Clemson. And if that is the case next year and he, vultures a couple of those touchdowns away, I am worried about that. I guess the only positive is he may get a lot more opportunities near the goal line if the offense takes a step up like we're all expecting it. I expect a lot of passing as well because the Jags defense, as we saw, it's not what it was a couple years ago. They give up a lot of points, so I think they're going to be chasing in games. So that is one concern I have as well. I think the second round is a nice price to get James Robinson right now, but that's going to do it for us. That's all things Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars we're going to talk today. If you want more from Marcus and myself, you can go and download the NFL Fantasy Football Podcast at NFL.com/podcast or wherever you go to get your podcast. And if you still want more fantasy football content, head over to our YouTube page. We got lots of videos like this and more coming. YouTube.com/NFL Fantasy Football. And make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching.